So I have three questions first. I put it all together, and then Alex, just start however you want, to whichever you want to go. Because I was thinking, looking back now, so where were the main takeaways or key points from the Alaskan summit, and how did that discussion around frozen assets play out at the summit, or did it not play out? And do you think the summit achieved anything substantive, or was it largely symbolic? Because ordinary people like me, we want it to be substantive, and we want it to be real. So that's for you, Alex. And if Dimitri wants to share, then please do so.
Well, I think that the summit in Alaska was extremely significant, maybe more in a symbolic way than in a substantive way, even though I'm not sure that we know exactly what played out in terms of substance. It seems to me, by the composition of the respective delegations between Russia and the United States, that the discussions were well beyond the question of Ukraine, because everybody is talking about ceasefire in Ukraine, about peace in Ukraine, and so forth. But nobody on either side of the two delegations was especially a Ukraine expert, or somebody who is prepared for discussions about peace in Ukraine. It was more part of their business, economics, finance experts. So it tells me that the discussions were probably far more extensive in terms of future discussions, future developments between the United States and Russia, which have enormous potential. And with respect to Ukraine, I think that the two sides probably are very close to a full agreement. The Russians have made their position clear, and they've made their position clear for nearly 3 years now. And their position never changed. They didn't shift. And so that continues to be the Russian position. They also made clear that they're not interested in an unconditional ceasefire. So I think that all the talk out of the Trump administration about requiring an unconditional ceasefire from Russia, I think that was basically psyops for certain domestic audiences. I'm not talking about ordinary people. I'm talking about maybe the Cold Warrior types who still insist on the post-World War II alliances and hostilities against Russia and so forth. But I think that the core team of Trump's administration understands perfectly well that an unconditional ceasefire is not acceptable to the Russians. And when the Russians said that, when the Russians accepted Trump's invitation to Alaska, they said that the proposal submitted by the Americans to our side was acceptable to us. That was a very strong signal that, in fact, Trump administration is not insisting on an unconditional ceasefire, and that's quite important. So it means that at least between Russia and the United States, the issue of Ukraine is no longer an issue at all. It can be set aside, and so now it's in the camp of the European powers, who, by contrast, are desperate for the war to continue until they get swept out of power, which I hope will happen sooner rather than later. And then the symbolism of the meeting exactly in Alaska is very important, because this is where Russia and the United States come together physically. This is where they share a border together, and this is where, since at least 1864, there have been different initiatives to plan to build a tunnel between the two nations to connect them physically, and this this has been, by for example, Henry Wallace, who was the vice president under FDR, and who discussed this project with Joseph Stalin. They were framing it as in this is a very important step toward the future of peace in the world. The two superpowers, coming together, developing commerce between one another, and building a new kind of future away from the Eurocentric world. And in fact, if you look at the map of the world, let's say from like the northern perspective, from the North Pole, and you realize that the center of gravity of the world, economic and political and even military power, is now shifting to the east, from the west to the east, primarily to China, but then India, Japan, all of this. You realize that this is becoming the new center of the world, and then Russia and the United States are there very close physically, and if they connect together, then they also connect to East Asia. And if you look at that map, you realize that now all of a sudden Europe is finding itself completely at the periphery, completely outside of this. And so this is a new direction of development globally, and I think in that sense is very important. And it also tells us that both on the Russian and American side, there's a certain enthusiasm for this, and that in Europe there's desperation to derail the relationship between Russia and the United States in any way possible. And so we see all these European leaders, they're practically hysterical. But I think that the changes that are occurring in the world right now are irreversible. They're moving like a tsunami. And there's nothing that Macron or Starmer or Friedrich Merz or any of these people can do about this.
Thank you, Alex. There's just so much to understand in the past, in the history. And I think if we continue to study, then it won't be difficult to understand what happened in the future. One thing that I have always done recently is just to geographically check locations and where. And it's really fascinating when you understand that geography. And of course, yeah, when you've always imparted to us that it's important to always follow the money, follow what's happened. So thank you for sharing those thoughts. Anything you want to add, Dimitri, before I give you my 3 set of questions for you?
I agree with most of Alex's analysis, but I part company on one important question, and that is, what is the Trump administration's true agenda? It does appear that the Trump administration has accepted finally, probably simply because it had no alternative, that there isn't going to be a ceasefire absent addressing Russia's core concerns, which I suppose is progress. And I certainly commend the Trump administration for talking to Vladimir Putin. Is an important approach, particularly when you're dealing with states that have enough weapons to destroy the world many times over. And I have to preface my answer by saying that everything I say about Donald Trump is colored by one awful reality that is staring us in the face, and that is that Donald Trump and his administration are currently perpetrating a genocide in Gaza. That it affects everything that I see and understand about his administration, and I cannot take seriously his claim to want to bring that existentially dangerous war in Ukraine to an end when he is perpetrating a genocide, and doing so along with, of course, Israel, the U.S.'s rabid attack dog in West Asia, in the most brazen manner, audacious manner, quite possibly in all of human history. It's just remarkable what we're witnessing. But quite apart from that, Pete Hegseth in February gave a speech, the U.S. Defense Secretary, I believe it was in Brussels, to leaders of NATO militaries, and he said that we want you to radically increase your military spending. We want you to buy the weapons necessary to sustain this war, and we will engage in a division of labor with you. We will pivot to Asia while you take care of Russia. Now, that doesn't mean they don't want a ceasefire. They do want a ceasefire because Ukraine is getting crushed. And I think they very much want to give it a respite and to give it an opportunity to rearm. But whether they want peace is another matter altogether. And I just don't understand how we can interpret Hegseth's comments as being conducive to peace when he's telling what are in effect Washington's vassals in Europe to radically increase their military spending and to continue to arm Ukraine. And then J.D. Vance basically did that again in an interview he gave, I think it was just a few days before the summit in Alaska. Now, he was more diplomatic than Hegseth. He didn't effectively order the Europeans to do this. What he said was, we want to stop funding this war, and if they want to buy the weapons from us and provide them to Ukraine, we're okay with that. Again, I don't regard that as an agenda that is truly designed to achieve peace. The United States is under no obligation to sell weapons to Europeans for the purpose of enabling them to arm Ukraine. They could just refuse to do that. They could even refuse to pull out of NATO because Europeans are potentially going to drag the United States into a nuclear war with Russia. And I imagine that the Europeans would stand at attention and say, yes, sir, Donald, if Donald was prepared to go that far to bring an end to this war. So for me, I'm much more interested in Donald Trump's actions than in his rhetoric. His rhetoric has certainly been, putting the emphasis on bringing a war, this merciful end to this war. But his actions, to my mind, do not support the interpretation that he genuinely wants to bring this to an end in a sustainable way that Russia can accept.
Thanks, Dimitri. And since you mentioned about Israel and Gaza, I got this from your website, and you've said Israel is a massive United States military base masquerading as a country. So without the lavish support of the United States, including nearly $2 billion in annual U.S. military aid to Israel would have been compelled to make peace with Palestinians and its neighbors long ago. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I was also hoping that maybe you and Alex could also share if there's any discussion or that is kind of favorable to what's happening in Gaza. I still remember Vanessa Billy always saying that no matter what the other discussions are, if the Gaza situation cannot be resolved, then what's the good of having all this multipolar gathering or shift? So from a legal perspective, I want to kind of go back to that Russian asset. So because it's all about the money, right? Mostly about the money. So how was the justification for asset seizure framed at the summit, and how valid is it? And did the summit reveal cracks within Western unity in handling Russia?
Sorry, is that question? I broke up there, so I didn't get over. You said, was that
You could start with it, Dimitri, because I was thinking from a legal perspective, how was the justification for asset seizure framed at the summit, and how valid is it? And my question is not to divert our conversation from Israel, because I know definitely that these are all connected. And if we cannot even resolve, and yes, we don't have to be focused much on the Ukraine, not because the Americans or the government or people don't care about it, but sometimes it drains you and it diverts you so much from what's happening in Palestine. So,
yeah,
yes.
I didn't mean to intervene. What happened, Grace, is you broke up, and so I didn't know if the question was directed at me or Alex, because I didn't get much of what you said. So I'm happy for Alex to take this, because I didn't hear the entire question. Apologies.
Okay, so here's what I want to say on the account of Israel. I entirely agree with Dimitri that this is probably the most god-awful thing that anybody ever thought that they would witness in their lifetimes. and there can be no justification for it. However, here's the situation. Let's keep perspective. Trump has been in office for about 7 months. Israel was created in the Middle East by the British Empire, and the groundwork for creation of Israel goes back to 1870s, if not earlier. And the whole situation there has been rigged for war, for demolition, for genocide, for a very, very long time. And part of those preparations included, in the 1890s, commissioning the writing of the Schofield Bible, and then promoting that particular version of Christianity in the United States to a very, very large segment of the American population, who are now the Christian evangelicals, who together with the Zionist Jews form a very, very large voting bloc. I think it's something like 60 to 70 million people. And if you study a little bit what their what the source is for their devotion to Israel, for their loyalty to the state of Israel, it's extremely irrational. They see this all as end times, as rupture, as biblical level stuff. And if any leader, politician, is perceived as not supportive of Israel, they might be interpreted as Antichrist. So it's politically it's such an explosive question that any politician, any leader who overtly steers away from supporting Israel, or who would even venture to have a balanced point of view between Israelis and Palestinians, is committing political suicide. And you don't have to go far to find examples of this. One of the recent one was Jeremy Corbyn in the United Kingdom, who really wasn't even remotely anti-Semitic. He just, kind of used to say, Palestinians are people also. They also have a right to defend themselves. He was trying to be balanced, that's all. And they tore him apart. They labeled him anti-Semite. They tore him apart, and they completely disenfranchised him. They eliminated him from British political life. And so, again, I'm not justifying Trump, but I'm wondering if they didn't make the decision, okay, we can't unrig this because it's been rigged for decades. But you have to take on priority issues, because if you don't, then what is happening to the Palestinians today is going to keep happening. And this has been business as usual for the British Empire, meaning using famine as a weapon of war, slaughtering massive amounts of completely innocent people, shutting people off into internment camps and concentration camps. They've been doing this for more than 200 years now. Just to give you an example, because this was, before social media, when people couldn't really follow day-to-day events and they didn't really realize what was going on. But let's say that over a 120-year period between 1757 and 1870s, at some point, 1880s, 120-year period, India was under direct British rule. In those 120 years, they experienced 31 famines. So that was one famine every 4 years, even less. since India gained its independence, how many famines did they have? 0. And during India is an old civilization, right? So they have historical records. In 2,000 years before 1757, they had 16 major famines. So one every 110 years or so. So you see, it's, and then you have Benjamin Disraeli in the early 1800s on record saying, whoever opposes us, we will force them into submission by blockades and starvation. Irish potato famine, which wasn't a potato famine, it was an attempt to get rid of the Irish population wholesale. So let's say if you don't end this system, if you do not end this system and attack exactly the source of these horrors, then what's happening in Gaza today is going to keep happening. This is not a unique experience in the history of humanity. So again, it's not to justify it, but you really have to go against the global financier elite. And this is something that Trump has said in a number of occasions. And I was on a call in January of this year with Steve Bannon. And Steve Bannon said, Trump, this was exactly a week before Trump's inauguration. And Steve Bannon said, in 1 week starts the Day of Thunder. Trump is going to take on he didn't say global financier elite, he said them. He said the people who are in control of the most powerful empire in the history of the world. And then about a month ago, I spoke with Susan Kokinda on a podcast like this. And Susan Kokinda said that she was, she's part of Promethean Action and LaRouche organization. She's very active in the Republican Party in Michigan. And she was at a campaign event where Trump was present. It wasn't one of those big, giant campaign rallies. It was a smaller gathering of the Michigan Republican caucus. And she said that Trump, when he addressed the people, he said, please join me in the final battle against the global financier elites. Now, you could say like, well, yeah, talk is cheap. He might have just been saying this, but why would you say this? You wouldn't really need to say this if you didn't mean it, because I think that the ordinary voter in the United States does not really correlate their grievances, their real grievances in life, to the global financier elite. You could talk about immigrants, you could talk about inflation, you could talk about so many things if you just wanted to win the election, if that was the whole thing. You wouldn't even have to formulate the thought. You would be better off talking about whatever else that actually is a popular grievance, and then go along with the financier elite, because then they would be your donors, like they were for Barack Obama and Biden and Bush before that, and Clinton before that. No, he actually declared war on them. And okay, so we don't know how that's going, but this week something interesting happened. Trump moved to fire one of the Federal Reserve governors. And then I think the day after that, he posted on Truth Social a message directly attacking George Soros and his son, who are George Soros is not the peak of the political hierarchy. I mean, of this power hierarchy. They're probably one notch down, but Soros has pretty much been untouchable and unmentionable. I remember once watching Newt Gingrich on CNBC or ABC, I don't remember exactly what. And Newt Gingrich was trying to convey, George Soros has been funding a lot of these programs that are actually undermining our system and destabilizing the United States. And every time he mentioned the name George Soros, the anchor would just like, yeah, let's, that's conspiracy theories. Let's not go there. Let's not talk about that. And then he finally stopped and he said, like, what, am I not allowed to mention George Soros? And she was like, well, yeah, I'd like to move on to these important questions. We don't want to entertain. So, you really could not touch there. Trump went there, and he went there with a very, very direct attack, saying that these two, George Soros and his talented son, Alex, should be arrested and prosecuted. That's a very important shot across the bow. And so I tend to think that Trump is doing a number of very important things right. And of course, one of them is talking to the Russians directly, because that's by far the most important bilateral relationship in the world when it comes to the future of peace in the world, United States and Russia. And they're clearly discussing things in a far, far more broader way than we know, because, last week, Tulsi Gabbard forbid the American intelligence agencies from sharing intelligence on the discussions between Russia and the United States. That also tells you something. And so anyway, in spite of Gaza, in spite of the events in the Middle East, which seem incomprehensible and unjustifiable, I do think that Trump administration is steering the ship in the right direction. And then, even if my impressions were wrong, even if I were too optimistic, I also pay attention at the way the Russians are talking about Trump administration, the way the Chinese are talking about the Trump administration, and the way the British are talking about the Trump administration. And so the Russians and the Chinese are very supportive, whereas the British are absolutely hysterical. And, just after, on Tuesday, they had a cabinet meeting in which Trump talked about firing this DEI Federal Reserve governor, which is, really crossing the red line. You don't desecrate the inner sanctum of this banker organization that is completely unaccountable to the American people. And then everybody was going like, oh, he's undermining the foundations of our democracy. Trump is attacking the Federal Reserve. He's jeopardizing the independence of the Federal Reserve Bank. And, and so it's very clear that the British establishment and their media are very, very, very worried about what Trump is doing. So that tells me also that he's got to be doing something right.
Thank you, Alex. And before I pass it on to Dr. Reza, I want to read for the audience what you mentioned on what Donald Trump posted. He posted, George Soros and his wonderful radical left son should be charged with RICO because of their support of violent protest and much more all throughout the United States of America. We're not going to allow these lunatics to rip apart America anymore, never giving it so much as a chance to breathe and be free. Soros and his group of psychopaths have caused great damage to our country. That includes his crazy West Coast friends. Be careful, we're watching you. Thank you for your attention to this matter. I was really excited to read that too. So thank you, Alex. Yes.
I think that's actually very significant. This is not a small thing. He has, this hasn't been part of the rhetoric. This is new. This is, and my contention has been, he kept the Epstein files secret, which was a big disappointment. But I thought, I imagine that if I were in power, I would keep them secret as well, because they are an exceedingly powerful political weapon. He passed the big, beautiful bill, which consolidated his political base at home. And so I think that we had to wait until this certain moment in time for Trump to feel secure enough politically and powerful enough to now start taking on the people like George Soros. He wasn't railing against George Soros in his campaign speeches, but he was saying, I want to take on the global financier elites. And if if you needed an embodiment of global financier elites, it would be George Soros.
I just wanted to add some thoughts to some questions to the ideas that Alex and Dimitri raised, especially the last few with Alex, is my idea from the way I see it from the Eastern perspective is that the discussions that you're discussing with George Soros are these internal family feuds as opposed to a bigger change within the structure of the hegemonic system that is the West. Is this different families like in the film or the book Dune? They're vying for power within the same system, but they're not trying to revolutionize or change the system. It's different families coming in to take the harvest of Arrakis and the spice to control the rest of the universe. I because of the fact that I see that the West, when it comes to the East, and they've always kind of associated Russia with the East as well, is that they want to hold dominion and power. And you rightfully described the British for 200 years causing all kind of genocide and famine, and even in Iran they caused famine and millions were killed in Iran, which is never discussed. All of these famines was to maintain their dominance and power. And I feel the DNA of the United States is the bastard child of Europe, and that's not going to change. What they do is to maintain their dominance, their hegemony, either be it through the finances, the UN Security Council, wars, Israel proxy. So this feud between, for example, the Trump house and the Soros house, or the Rockefeller houses, or any of these houses, are they genuine changes towards direction where the United States will become a applier of equality to the world? I generally don't think that's going to happen. I think what it is Donald Trump is trying to consolidate more power for his camp, for his group, for his family. And when I say family, not necessarily just Don Jr. Trump, but the people who are part of his gang, part of his mega movement as such, so that continues. And when that continues and he's not president, he can still financially benefit from it. If you just drive down, to Scotland, he has a golf course. You drive down to Oman, they licensing Trump name to build golf course and hotels there. And how many billions did Jared Kushner receive from the Persian Gulf Arab states after Donald Trump lost his presidency and it went to Biden? He wasn't even during his presidency. So I think he's trying to establish certain kind of power so that he can benefit from it financially later on. And if he attacks people like Soros, these, I believe, are internal family feuds. They will not fix the problems of genocide again being repeated in another part of the world, or the current one in Israel, in Palestine by Israel. And we can see the fact that even during the time of the Democrats, the idea of war with Iran, even though sometimes we talked about, it wasn't really practical. Now he's made it happen. He's attacked Iran. He's allowed Israel to attack Iran during his presidency a number of times. So I don't know. I find it very hard if I sit in the space of East, China, which was occupied 100 years by the British, India, which was famine, as you described, caused, Iran, that has been sanctioned for 47 years, and they want to reimpose UN sanctions again, going back 6-7 years, from 6-7 years before the JCPOA. Is this internal movement within Trump and his also the other aspect of weakening Europe, so that he, United States, or the elite in the United States. And we have to clarify this for our audience, that when we talk about United States, we don't talk about the 350 million people that live there. The people that benefit from Trump's plans and Soros's plans is the elite that you discussed, the 1, 2, 3 notch at the top, the 1%, maybe even less than 1%. Because we can see, poverty in the United Kingdom, you can see poverty in Europe, you can see poverty in United States increasing. So it's not, they're not the people who are benefiting. NHS is falling apart, the roads are full of potholes. So the people are not benefiting from any of these policies that are taking place. Yet it's only the elite at the top. So I don't know. I have to see in 3-4 years if you don't, if there isn't a apocalypse and the appearance of Jesus and the Mahdi for the Muslims when things really change. But we have to see if the stuff that Donald Trump you're discussing actually changes the direction of the West and East West interaction. And he's definitely no fan of the BRICS and the rising of the East. And he's tried to, prevent it with his sanctions and tariffs and threats. So I don't know. I'll have to see how it works out. But he's someone that I definitely cannot trust. He's shown himself to be unreliable from someone who's from this side of the world and analyzes it from the action that he's taken. And I genuinely think that he works for the 1% elite. But as I said, that I see it as an internal feud between the families within that 1%. I don't have a specific question. I was going to say, what do you think? As you said, he had a meeting in Russia. We don't know what the exact discussions were, but we can see they're putting pressure on Iran, and we believe that Iran and China and Russia are kind of a triangle that is trying to resist the pressure from the West. And if they're trying to put pressure on Iran, and then we know they're going to put pressure, but already putting pressure on Russia through the war, we know the last pressure will be on China, either through Taiwan or another situation. Is there generally a changing of the ship direction, or is it just what do you call it? And when they do magic, they try to distract you with one hand so they can do something else. And that could be to either Dimitri or Alex.
Well, I'd be curious to know what Dimitri thinks about this, because I have my own perspective. I could be wrong, but
Well, for purposes of brevity, I didn't recite all the reasons for which I am intensely skeptical about Donald Trump's true intentions. I could have talked about the criminal war of aggression on Iran. I could have talked about the fact that they pretended to be negotiating with the Islamic Republic when in fact they were preparing to launch this criminal war of aggression. I could have talked about the bombardment of Yemen, the assassination of Qasem Soleimani at the end of the first Trump administration, the fact that the first Trump administration was the first U.S. administration to provide lethal weaponry to Ukraine. I could have talked about the fact that the Trump administration destroyed the JCPOA with Iran and pulled the United States out of the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. What I see in Donald Trump's record, and by the way, Alex, I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said about the history of the British Empire. And, it's very important that be said. And I don't discount that at all. But when I look at the totality of Donald Trump's record, not just in Palestine and not just in this administration, what I see is a bloodthirsty warmonger, a man who is committed to U.S. hegemony and who is trying desperately, in my view, because he made a commitment to his base. And a lot of people in the United States wanted an end to the forever wars, and they still do. So Donald Trump, knowing full well that he could win quite a few votes by making that pitch. And by the way, that entire issue was ceded to him by the Democrats. The Democrats didn't even pretend to be interested in peace. They didn't even pretend to be interested in talking to the Russians. So he made that commitment, and now he has a political problem. And the political problem is he needs to appear as though he's really trying hard to bring an end to the Ukraine war. And this Alaska summit, to my mind, was largely theater. And he knew perfectly well that the Europeans were going to nix it, that Zelensky was going to continue to take a maximalist approach to any type of negotiation with Russia. And then he could point the finger at them and blame them. And I think this is exactly, I was predicting this was going to happen. And as what I can see is that this is exactly what is playing out. He could force an end to this war. He has the leverage over European governments and Zelensky to do that. He's refusing to use that leverage, just as he's refusing to use his leverage over the Israeli regime. And the only other thing I want to say is, I think that the political environment has changed when it comes to the war in Gaza. It's not a war, it's a genocide. And that is to say that the polls show that even in the United States, people are now more sympathetic. More people are sympathetic with the Palestinians than there are with the Israelis. The proportion of people in the West who think that Israel is committing genocide is either approaching a majority in the United States or is in excess of a majority. Within the Democratic Party, there's intense hostility towards Israel. So Donald Trump is operating in a very different political environment now than Jeremy Corbyn was operating in. And I think that if he brought an end to this war, the man would be a hero with probably 2/3 of the voters in every Western country and non-Western country well, actually much more than 2/3 in the non-Western countries of this world. He would elevate himself to the status of a person who actually potentially could make a claim to deserving the Nobel Peace Prize. If he brought this to an end definitively and used his leverage to ensure that the Palestinian people had justice at last, he has no interest in doing that as far as I can tell. So I'm intensely skeptical, and I would love to be wrong about this. I really would. I hope you're right.
Okay, so I think of the things that you listed as a reasons to doubt Donald Trump. I would say that withdrawing from the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty in 2019, and no, sorry, that was 2000 and when?
I believe that was I think it was 2019, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, you're right. 2019. And then the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. I think that both of those examples are mistakes. I think that was a very, very terrible blunder on Trump's part. Both of those. The recent attacks on Iran, I don't see them the same way. Because one thing that I know from the United States, inner plumbing of Washington, D.C., is that the pressure on Trump to go to war against Iran, to join Israel in the war against Iran was tremendous. And a lot of people were talking about this. And Trump didn't want to do it. But he wasn't able to hold them back. And so what happened is that Trump didn't want a real war, so he gave them a fake one. And what I mean by this is that there were contacts between the Iranian leadership and the United States leadership, and I'm not privy to those to those contacts, obviously, but pretty much what happened is that the American side said, "Look, terribly sorry about this. We can't hold this back. We're going to have to give them some kind of a show. So we're going to have to bomb you. We're going to bomb here, here, and here. That's going to happen in about 48 hours. We're telling you so you can remove anything that's important and valuable to you. And then we understand that you're going to have to retaliate. So if you could be so kind to tell us exactly where so that we can evacuate our people." And that's exactly what happened. So it wasn't a war. It was a fake war. It was like World Wrestling Federation type of violence. Okay, and so then Trump climbs up on his high horse and says, "We obliterated Iranian nuclear program, obliterated it," and to this day he's insisting on this word. Why? Because Iran's nuclear program today is the same as Saddam's weapons of mass destruction program 20 years ago. It's the justification for war against Iran, but it's not the objective. Nobody cares about Iranian nuclear program. If Shah Reza Pahlavi was in charge in Tehran, they would build a nuclear program for Iran. They wouldn't care. The objective of the war against Iran is regime change. It has been the whole time. The nuclear program is merely the pretext, the justification. So what Trump did is he gave them a fake war, and he said, guess what? The nuclear program, it doesn't exist anymore. So the war is over. It's finished. Stop the fighting. And then, people started like, no, you didn't obliterate. Yes, we did. And he's insisting on that. Why? Because he obliterated the justification for war against Iran. But the collective West, the British, the French, NATO, the Israelis, they don't care about the nuclear program. They want regime change in Tehran. And then when they asked Donald Trump, do you want a regime change in Tehran? He said, no, I don't. And in fact, there's a lot of leaked information that they are very extensive, still to this day, very extensive talks between the United States and Tehran. And I have okay. So another insight from Susan Kokinda is that apparently Trump in cabinet meetings is frequently referring to the supposed enemies of the United States as our so-called enemies, or he says people who are perceived to be our enemies. Meaning, when it comes to talking about Russia, North Korea, Iran, China, and so forth, he's clearly not talking about them as being enemies. He's talking about them being our supposed enemy, or people who are perceived as our enemies. What I mean by this is that Trump has to navigate between domestic political realities, which have been entrenched in a certain way pretty much since 1947, since the British took control effectively of the American political establishment. After they assassinated Franklin Delano Roosevelt and made Harry Truman the president. And this is not something you can change overnight. And if you need an example from the other side, we can talk about Vladimir Putin's response to the Ukraine crisis in 2014, which was profoundly disappointing to many people in Russia. And Vladimir Putin had the biggest decline in support and popularity for failing to intervene in the Donbass in 2014. People on TV in Russia were openly talking about Vladimir Putin betraying the Russian brethren in Ukraine. But he didn't. It's just that, he judged that it wasn't, that the time was not right to intervene. Why? Probably because he himself was facing certain, political realities where, like if you did what your heart tells you is the right thing to do, you might end up burning too much of your political capital and then jeopardizing much more important items on the agenda that are higher priority. And if you fail those, then everything else fails too. I mean, I don't know that I'm, I don't know that I'm right about this, but the inevitable reality of political life is that whatever you do, you're burning up political capital. And you always have to choose which battles you fight and which battles you don't fight, or you delay, or you leave them for tomorrow.
Could I just put a question to in response to something that Alex said, and namely that is the nature of the war that was waged on Iran. From my perspective, I mean, the way it ended, Alex, definitely came off as quite fake. But up until that point in time, that looked to me from the outside like a real war. And they were doing a lot to inflict savage damage upon the Iranian people, killing civilians, destroying, civilian infrastructure, attacking journalists. I mean, it was the level of barbarism we've come accustomed to from Israel. And what happened is, from my perspective, is that Israel was getting, crushed by the ballistic missiles being fired from Iran. It wasn't as though they were on the verge of going extinct, but they were suffering a level of damage that they were wholly unaccustomed to. And they were beginning to realize that they were locked in a war of attrition that they were going to lose. And so they got bailed out. But from what I could see, the intention from the beginning was to wage a real war in Iran. It's just that it went way off the rails. Now, who am I to judge at the end of the day? I think what we really should be asking is our friends in Iran how they perceived this. Was this a real attempt to crush Iran, to destroy the country, or was it just theater?
That's a good question. So from my understanding from local news and local discussions that they have, within a few days, they had planned to execute or assassinate a number of high-ranking officials. even up to the point of Ayatollah Khamenei. And so that the country will fall into chaos. Infrastructure will then be attacked by mercenaries that they have from inside and possibly from maybe the Kurdistan or the southeast Baluchistan area, possibly from Azerbaijan as well, and carve Iran up, balkanize Iran, which is a plan they've had for like 40, 50 years. And what happened is within the first 12 hours, Iranian defense was back online. Ayatollah Khamenei had appointed appointed new commanders because they, I think, assassinated 28, 29 high-ranking commanders. So head of the military, head of the joint military, head of Air Force, Iranian Revolutionary Guards, Air Force, Missile Command, all of these important positions. So then within the first 12 hours, 16 hours, Iran was able to begin to strike back. And as we know, Iran only used the first generation, second generation. They haven't used the most recent missiles that they had. And to the point where Ayatollah Khamenei was in the command room, not necessarily in the same room as the military, but they said that when we would ask for direction, it would come back within 10 minutes, reply to the questions we had regarding military command questions. And so I think by the 12th day, Iran was hitting Israel so hard that Israelis, I think within the first 3-4 days, you see Israeli ministers saying, crying out, did we expect this kind of reply? Did we expect this kind of reaction? How long will this last? So you can see that they're already on the ropes, as they say. And I think Donald Trump at the beginning was saying that, yes, I knew all about this. I was part of this, we're going to do regime change. And then when the tide turned and Iran was really devastating Israel, Donald Trump tried to find a way out for Israel. And he doesn't want to be, as Alex rightly says, he doesn't want to be dragged into a war. Because a war with Iran is not going to be a war like with Afghanistan or a war with Iraq. There's going to be thousands of American NATO military personnel being killed, coming back in body bags, and that won't look good for him, for his presidency. And so he wanted to then do a kind of like Alex rightly said, try to say, look, we've attacked it, it's completely finished, so let's not talk about it anymore. And from what I've heard, Ayatollah Khamenei said that we will end it, but we will have to have the final hit. So they were there. So with Israel, they strike Israel, and then Israel didn't strike back. And with America, after they hit the nuclear sites with the B-2 bombers, Iran hit the Qatar base. They fired approximately 10, 12 missiles, and half of them, or 7 of them, hit the base. Just to demonstrate that if you want to continue like that, we can continue hitting your bases. So I don't think it was a show. I think what happened is they miscalculated, and I think on the 23rd of August, the head of Pentagon's military intelligence was removed because he was stating that Donald Trump we only set back Iran by a few months, not completely destroyed the nuclear program or enrichment. We only set them back for a few months. And so that they miscalculated a lot of things. The Israeli intelligence, Israelis and the Americans. And so when Iranians also came back and became patriotic and defended the government and the military and stood behind Ayatollah Khamenei, they have a lot of grievances with the elected government regards economic and other issues. But they stood behind the military, realizing that if the military wasn't there or isn't there, Israel would completely destroy a lot of, like you said, infrastructure like in Syria and balkanize the country and kill a lot of people. And it would be like, Daesh 3.0. It wouldn't be anything that you could comprehend because it's such a vast country. And so they supported. And then when you have that kind of support behind the leadership, specifically Ayatollah Khamenei and the military, it gives a great sense of power and energy for them to counter and fight back against America and the world to say, okay, it's not about, we can't regime change because the people are supporting the leadership. So let's go to, let's cease fire or stop hostilities. And Iran has stated that this is not a ceasefire. We're expecting America to attack. But what they said recently, the head of the military Mousavi, his name is Mousavi, he said that this time if Israel attacks, and this is a key phrase that he used, we will have no red lines. So before they would have incrementation of their attacks, if they attack, for example, a electricity power plant, we would hit electricity power plant. If they attack water power plant, blah, blah, blah. But in this case, they said we won't have a red line. So I think they're like, look, either we're going to have to end this idea of them keep attacking us, because this is the third or fourth round of attack that they had, or they're going to keep doing it like they do in Lebanon and in Syria without any major cost to the fact that they can attack us. So I think it was a genuine war. They miscalculated. And then Donald Trump, as Alex said, just wanted to, wrap it up and not get bogged down into a massive war with Iran.
Reza, a question quickly. What do you think is the likelihood that Iran might strike at Israel first, preemptively, rather than wait for an attack to retaliate, to say the attack is coming 100%, so if the war is inevitable, we're better off throwing the first punch?
So we have a few issues. One is that Iran follows the doctrine of never starting a war initially. And that's been the case since the revolution, right? And it's also an Islamic doctrine, Islamic country, that you never attack first, you only defend yourself. But once attack is done, you can then defend yourself to whatever extent you need to. The other issue is we have in Iran elected administration that is really trying its best to do some kind of a deal with the United States. Even though United States literally said, we're distracting you so we can attack you. So I don't think Iran will hit initially. I think Iran is building up its reserves, building up its capabilities. It's adjusting its missile capabilities now that it's got real world experience of what works and what doesn't work. And I believe they would have brought some military equipment from the Russians and the Chinese to bolster up places where they're weak. I do hope they bring in a lot of people say, there's no need for fighter jets and, attack jets and stuff. I genuinely think that you need to have fighter jets to protect some areas of a vast country like Iran, that there's no defense missile batteries. So hopefully they've plugged in a lot of the holes that existed. And apparently they've rounded up 21,000 possible, spies or people who are acting in a military capacity assisting Israel, and maybe even more than 21,000. So a lot of internal stuff has happened, and they'll continue to do that. But I don't think they will attack first. But I think if they attack this time, they will hit much harder than they have before. And I think they're a little bit more wary of not being relaxed with like they were before, because we're negotiating. There's no likelihood of them attacking now. They got caught off guard. I think this time they're constantly on the defensive in case there is an attack. So, but I do genuinely believe that Israel will try to attack again. I don't know if it'll be like it was in the air. I think maybe they'll try and instigate groups within and on the borders. I just don't see what else they can do, because they tried economic sanctions. They tried the internal strife in 2021 or 2 with Massa Amini riots. They've tried, economic and political, and they tried the military. So I don't know what other tool different to these or a combination of these they want to use next that they think, because the people are behind the leadership. That has to go into their calculation of, okay, we can't make the people uprise and then support that kind of regime change. So what else they're gonna do? They can't march in 20, 30, 40,000 mercenaries, because they'll get slaughtered. It's not like Syria, because a lot of the generals, they were getting phone calls right in Iran. They were saying, look, put your weapon down, say that you're not part of you don't support the Iranian regime, and we'll let you live and your family live. No military general did that. If this was Syria or Iraq in 2014-13 when Daesh attacked, a lot of people just, ran away. Iranians, none of them did that. So they realized, okay, we can't threaten them like that. Even if there's 20, 30,000, we can somehow muster from on the borders to attack. People will get killed, but those groups will get annihilated. And also Iran right now with Pakistan, they're doing military deal where they get rid of or they attack their enemies in Pakistan, and Pakistan is able to attack its kind of terrorist groups that are based in Iran. So it's trying to neutralize all of these elements, as well as bring in weapons that it doesn't have, as well as upgrade the weapons that it has. So I don't know what Israel can do more than it's done before, but I'm sure it will do something because it has to. There's no other choice for its expansion other than to get rid of Iran or balkanize Iran.
Thank you, Reza. Hartmut, do you want to share your insights and concerns?
Yes, it's a very interesting conversation. Thank you so much. And what I think, or what I'm talking about, is that we should not forget the Agenda 2030, like Dimitri said, or that we are, or Dr. Reza said, we work here for the 1%, or we discuss about the politics for the 1%, and not for the people. And in my opinion, the meeting in Alaska was more about a meeting to share the world among themselves. So you have Russia, you have the USA, you have China, and you have Israel, and that's it. And the European Union is only, let's say, something which is which can be a collateral damage at the end. And the situation is that in 2030 we will have the Agenda 2030 is characterized by a technocracy which is run by an oligarchy or by companies, and companies need resources, and this is something what they can do. For example, by negotiating with Russia in order to get the commodities. That the European Union works in the favor of the USA. You can see in the policy of Ursula von der Leyen when she discussed in USA the custom percentages with Trump. So everything was accepted, and we have to pay. Then we have to pay for Ukraine. Then the European Union stopped completely on the justice level the maintenance and the repair of Nord Stream 2 and Nord Stream. So the situation is that the European Union will not get any cheap commodities anymore, and without cheap commodities, you don't have an economy which can work. So it's I don't know how I can say it, but in my opinion, European Union and also including UK is giving as a bone to someone who wants to play with it. What's your opinion about that? Alex?
Is that for Dimitri or Alex? Hartmut, who do you want to see first? Is it for Dimitri or for Alex?
Oh, it's hard.
Any?
Hold on.
I think it's Alex's turn. Go ahead, Alex.
Okay, so I'm gonna leave the baton to Dimitri. So sorry, because I have to run out in a minute or two. So I just have to bail out. Unfortunately, I have another call that I have to catch in just a few minutes. So thank you very much. I really enjoyed this discussion. Grace, Reza, Dimitri, Hartmut, and all the viewers and listeners, thank you all for the time spent. And until the next time.
Thank you, Alex. And we'll make a shout
Bye-bye.
for you. Stay safe and well. Thank you.
Thank you, you two all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess Dimitri, please.
Okay. Could you? I'm sorry for that. I have a troublesome internet connection here in the car. Could you just repeat the question for me, Hartmut? I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, I want to know. We talk about Trump, the meeting between Trump and Putin, and in my opinion, we have to consider that that the Western world, including Trump, has also the Agenda 2030 on their radar. And the Agenda 2030 is characterized by a technocracy which is run by companies, less by governments. And the United States is more, or Trump is more interested in making everything right concerning the commodity trade. And we can see that European Union, like, for example, Ursula von der Leyen, she accepted everything what was said concerning the customs. And she didn't really negotiate with Trump. Then the European Union stopped Nord Stream 2 and Nord Stream 1 from the justice point of view, so that there will no maintenance, there will no repair, nothing. So we will not get any cheap commodities in the near future at all, which is, let's say, more or less the knife in the back of the European Union. So so at the end we talk about Russia, China, Israel, and USA as the big players, and the European Union is only a collateral damage. And what is your thought about these things? Do you see it the same way, or do you have a different point of view?
Well, first of all, I don't regard Israel as a big player. I think Israel is a pipsqueak whose power derives entirely from the United States government and other Western governments. Israel will do as it is told by Washington. I know there are many people who disagree with that assessment and think that Israel exercised some sort of mystical control over the U.S. political elite, but I'm not one of those persons. At the end of the day, all of these things you mentioned are important considerations, but I think it all comes back to what I've been saying from the beginning, which is the ultimate objective here is to maintain the global hegemony of a Western-based elite, whether through techno-feudalism, as Yanis Varoufakis refers to it, whether it's through, a stranglehold over key commodities, rare earths, and so forth. All the signs that I see are pointing towards a continuation. I agree with Brian Berlitic that there's a continuity of agenda. Trump does not represent a break with the past. He is escalating and pursuing the project of maintaining and even entrenching to a greater degree than previously the hegemony of global elites, and all of the policies that he's adopting, whether it be tariffs. The tariff war is not being waged, in my opinion, in order to benefit the American people. The tariff war is being waged in order to weaken the geopolitical rivals of the United States. And in some bizarre sort of way, I think Donald Trump believes that the tariffs are going to enable the United States to maintain dollar hegemony. This is something I've been discussing with a Greek economist by the name of Kostas Lapavitsas at the University of London. So I really think that we need to keep our eye on the ball when we talk about the Trump administration. And Alex is one of many voices in the alternative media who have, I think, I have tremendous respect for Alex's analysis. In many respects, I agree with him. But many voices, geopolitical analysts in the alternative media, still seem inclined to give Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt when it comes to peace and when it comes to multipolarity. I am not inclined to do that for all of the reasons I've stated and then some. I will say that one other thing I want to add is that despite the fact that I was convinced that Donald Trump was a warmonger and a neocon as a result of his first administration, when he returned to the White House, I was actually prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt, because he sent Steve Witkoff off to Palestine, and the reports were that Witkoff compelled Netanyahu to enter into a ceasefire. And also he was speaking the rhetoric of peace in regard to Russia and the Ukraine war. But when Netanyahu tore up the ceasefire agreement and began openly to starve the civilian population of Gaza, and to do this with the full-throated support of the Trump administration, at that stage I said, I'm done giving this man the benefit of the doubt. He is a genocidal war criminal. He is absolutely determined to maintain the global hegemony of the Western-based elites, and we should be profoundly mistrustful of anything he says relating to peace. I hope I answered your question, but that's where I'm coming from. And sometimes I feel like a voice in the wilderness in the alternative media, but I'm starting to get the sense that others are coming around.
No, let's say it's this way. They work all in the same way, in my opinion. They get exchanged and they work on the same plan. There's no big difference. Yeah, because the Biden administration tried to destroy European Union, including Germany, and I don't see that Trump doesn't make any change. No. Yeah. And what I would also found interesting was a quote of the Colombian president, Gustavo Petro. He said, Gaza is an experiment carried out by the rich great powers to show the world how they will respond to a rebellion of humanity. They are planning to bomb us all. This is very controversial, but I think it's a very interesting statement.
I think it's a very true statement, and I applaud Gustavo Petro for having the courage to say it. It's no small thing to say that when you live in the backyard of the United States. But that's what it is. This is a message to all those who might oppose, U.S. hegemony, Western hegemony. We will destroy you, and there is no barbarism we will not engage in for that purpose. The Palestinian people are being made an example of, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I want to add something to what you said is that I will try, make it a little bit more optimistic before we wrap it up, is the suffering of the Palestinians, and I've said this to other friends, the suffering of the Palestinians has been the mechanism by purifying evil, the differentiation between the purification of evil and good. And many people had seen what Israel and the Zionist colony and project and the foreign policy of the United States and all of the, the British Empire. A lot of people had known this. We had known this, but it had to take the genocide and the spilling of thousands of Palestinian blood for the rest of the world to wake up, to see that what the United, Ayatollah Khamenei and Imam Khomeini, the people who helped kind of steer the revolution and were the leaders of Iran, had stated that 50 years ago, there's videos of him saying, Imam Khomeini, Israel will not stop at its current borders. It's designed for it to be expanded, and we see that now. They stated that the United States cannot be trusted because its intention is to colonize and take over the world. We see that right now. It does a deal, Donald Trump comes up and tears it up. Sometimes he tears up his own deals, right? And he does a deal in his first administration. So it had to take the spilling of the blood of, and I'm not saying that it's a good thing or a right thing, but that had to have happened for millions, if not billions of people have woken up now and seen what the Zionist project and its backers are. And its backers are the Europeans, are the United States, are the Canadians and the Australians, where, as Dimitri says, I fully agree with that. And this is what Ayatollah Khamenei has said, is that Israel does not control the United States. This is a misdirection so that they can blame everything on Israel. It's the United States and the Europeans that not only control, but maintain through economic and military support. If the United States and Europe stop supplying weapons to Israel, within less than a space of a week, it will collapse. It will not have the ability to fight any of it won't have because it doesn't manufacture most of the weapons that it's using, the big bombs and stuff. So it won't have the capacity to attack the Palestinians and such. Its economy is a zombie economy. Various articles online now. It's just being propped up at the moment, right? Alex, Dimitri just discussed that or said earlier, and there's lots of articles about this as well, that a lot of not only people have left Israel, but a lot of people are taking money out to invest in different parts of Europe or other countries so that they can have a place to run away to. So a country like that, unless it's been propped up, it's just a tent. Unless it's been propped up by Europeans and Americans, it will collapse. And the world had to see this, unfortunately, after hundreds of thousands of Palestinians had to be, massacred and like in the most horrendous way. shooting of babies and children, starvation of children, and burning, and all the stuff that we've seen. They've traumatized the Palestinians without doubt, but they've traumatized the whole world with the inhumanity that they have. And the thing is, they don't only think about Palestinians like that. This, Israeli supremacist ideas that they have, they see the whole world like that. And a number of times I've seen Israelis on the talk shows in Hebrew, because somehow they think other people don't understand Hebrew and can't subtitle it, has stated that if America stops supporting us, we will also attack America. And Europeans, they don't care about anyone, right? They're happy for even their own prisoners, their own military personnel that are in captive or prisoners in Palestine, in Gaza, for them to be murdered, the Hannibal Directive and everything, if that gives them a stronger hand. So I do think the world is waking up, though. They're seeing the horrors of what colonialization is and how it continues, and it had never ended after the British Empire. It still continues now. And people have had enough of it. And it's directly linked to the suffering of people who live in Western countries, because of the leaders of the Western countries are too busy in investing people's taxpayers' monies into propping up a colonial base in Israel, and what they're doing with Ukraine. They're not investing that funds and resources and direction back into their own country. Or if we see that United States is happy to throw Germany and other Europeans under the bus by destroying the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which was providing, adequate and, fairly good priced gas to the German economy so that it could manufacture and, but they're like, no, that's fine. Don't manufacture in Germany. Go manufacture abroad. Right? It's cheaper somewhere else. If they're happy to do that with their allies, which is the closest to them, Europeans after the Second World War have been the closest to the United States economically and politically. If they're happy to do that with them, that just goes to show to the world that these countries that are ruling the world right now, they don't care about anyone. They don't even care about themselves. They're happy to throw themselves under the bus if it needs be. So as much as I see the suffering and it's terrible, and we all pray and hope that it stops soon, or it's stopped maybe by Iran or by someone else, I think that the world has woken up now. So many people have protested against Palestine, will continue to protest. And I see that it's an awakening that's happening in the world, and I just hope that it comes sooner, the whole process of stopping the genocide than later.
I want to mention that that the world is focused on Palestine. This is I agree. Whether they wake up, I don't see it, because if they would wake up, or if they woke up, they would also understood how many people died in Ukraine already. And this is its number, and these numbers are completely silenced. No one talks about these really. And we talk here about 1.3 million only on the Ukrainian side, and 300 or 400,000 on the Russian side. And politicians here in Germany, they discuss that we have to support Ukraine also with our soldiers. Yeah, so this is completely under the radar, and so you see that the focus is directed of the people. Yeah, of course. What's going on in Gaza is it's worse than Dresden. We had here Mr. Barenboim, who is the son of the famous musician. He works as a professor in Berlin. He said that in the area of East Berlin, there are more 2 or 3 bombs of Hiroshima destroyed from the explosive in quantity, which Israel has put on Gaza. So it will take 20, 30 years to reestablish it. And the question is, how do they want to do it? Because the people need food right now. They need to live right now. And maybe this is, we discussed it several times, Reza, that they really try to move the people from Gaza to the rest of the world. which I hope they won't, which I don't hope that they will get it done. But in my opinion, this is the reason why they put it on. I'm telling this because this is maybe the reason why they put it in the focus. Yeah.
Thank you, Hartmut. I wanted to add to especially what Dimitri and Reza said, that the people waking up. I know this was posted in the Joaquin Flores Telegram, but this is a Harvard Paris poll, and it said 60% of Gen Z Americans support Hamas over Israel, and that's voters age 18 to 28 believe Hamas/Palestine is more in the right versus the IDF and Israel. So maybe before we close up, Dimitri, if you just have any thoughts on what's going to happen with the frozen assets, because in the article of Alex, he said that a lot of these 300 to 335 billion assets of frozen assets is a big percentage of it, like 71 billion, is in France, and maybe so a lot more. So if I guess for me, my question would be: do you see any progress that they will make a decision to unfreeze that asset based on the ongoing relationship of Trump to Putin or with Putin?
I see no real movement in that direction at all. I think they'll continue to freeze the funds for as long as they can. They'll do it even though there isn't a scintilla of legality to it, even though they are risking, frankly, I won't go so far as to say risking the stability of Western banks, but they certainly will be doing significant damage to the Western financial system if they simply steal this money. The idea, I mean, anybody just looking at this objectively would be gobsmacked by the hypocrisy of them seizing Russia's state funds, while on the basis of a purported concern for international and human rights, as they are perpetrating a genocide and waging wars of aggression throughout West Asia. It's not just the genocide. So they're delegitimizing themselves. They're violating the law. They are continuing to, they're perpetuating the hostility between the Russian Federation and the West. But eventually, if the circumstances are right and they feel that there's enough benefit in it for them, they may ultimately liberate those funds. But for the time being, I don't see any real movement in that direction.
If I may add something to this, in Germany, there are voices who had the thought to invest these frozen funds of the Russian to Ukraine. Yeah,
that would just be theft. It's whatever they do with that money. If they don't give it back to the Russian Federation, they're stealing it, and the whole world knows it, at least outside of the West.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. Any more last thoughts, Dimitri?
Just one, and that is, I believe that the Palestinian people will survive and they will see freedom within our lifetimes. And I don't say that out of a sense of, wistful optimism. I think that's based on a cold, hard assessment of the facts.
You want to invite them to where they can connect with you? I mean, the audience.
Sure. So thank you very much, everybody, for listening. You can find my work on Reason to Resist. It's on YouTube and also on Rumble. That's Reason with the number 2 and Resist. And also I'm more active than is good for my health on X. And my handle there is at Dimitri Lascaris.
So that's in Reason to Resist. That's Rumble. And how about your website? Is still good? DimitriLascaris.org?
It's still functional, but I've migrated over to Substack. You can find me there again under Reason to Resist.
Oh, okay. So
I think I follow you on YouTube as well. I think you're on YouTube as well, right?
Right. That's my main gig nowadays. That's where you'll find most of our work.
Yeah. So if you don't remember his name, Dimitri Lascaris. Search it, and there you find YouTube, Rumble, and Substacks. And How about you, Dr. Reza?
I'm on Substack, Instagram. I'm not as active as Dimitri on X, but I'm more active on Instagram and Substack. So that's where I post my stuff. I started my YouTube channel now, so I'm trying to put some more stuff there. And I think this alternative media is what it's called, but I'm doing a paper, and it's called Resistant Media. And what we're doing is resistant media, because the legacy media, the mainstream TVs had a monopoly on information. But the internet, one of its positives has been enabling us to provide an alternative narrative so people can find language by which they can describe how they see the world better.
Hartmut?
From next week on, you can find me on dragonnews.com. This is my website on which I explain the war of the digital field, and this is how the artificial intelligence is used with the Agenda 2030 in order to overlay the natural field of humanity.
Well, thank you, everyone. And this is Grace Asagra, and you could find me at graceasagra.com or in the Rumble, and just type my name and feel free to connect with me. And thank you again. And as everyone will say, do your thing, even a small thing, but significant to shift the history. You're making a significance. Start with your family, because family is very important as a building foundation core nuclear family for the future of our world. Thank you. And so if you like this, do put a thumbs up, share, and subscribe. And be well wherever you are. Stay safe. Thank you.
Peace out.